Welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy Show with me, your host, Tara Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, April 8th. It's my mom's birthday. Shout out to my mom. Happy birthday. I am taking your questions live and my sister-in-law's birthday. Shout out to you, Kelly, as well. Not that she watches the show, but in case she is, shout out to her. I am taking your questions live, and we are going back to rookies this week. We've been talking about veterans for a while now because we had free agency and trades and drama and all kinds of rumors and whatnot. So it's been fun. We've been updating the rankings and hitting on free agencies and all the transitions, but we are so close. So close. I can taste it to the NFL draft. Oh, man, it's exciting. So I thought we would go back and visit the rookies, and we're not going to do like rookie overview or profiles or anything. I've done some videos on those in the past. I want us to focus in on all of the new information that is coming out about the top 30 visits, which teams are looking at which players, and look at mock drafts as well, because that will be key for us, because there are a lot of takeaways that we can get from these top 30 visits and trying to predict. And for your dynasty purposes, maybe make some last minute pivots away from some guys. I actually have a video that I'm going to put out next week of some veterans that are potentially on thin ice right before the draft and are at risk of some major stock dips for them, depending on how the draft works out. But we can take a look at these top 30 visits, look at the players that they're meeting with, these teams are meeting with, and try to get some takeaways from these meetings to try and pinpoint. Obviously, it'll be difficult to pinpoint exactly who they're going to draft because, of course, remember, just because they aren't meeting with the player for a top 30 visit does not mean that they're not going to draft players that are outside of that. Obviously, there are players that they met with at the combine, went to pro days, had conversations there. They've taken players out to dinner at pro days, combines, and stuff like that. So some people obviously maybe didn't necessarily have to have visits with certain teams for them to know them enough to feel very comfortable with drafting them. But if we see certain teams that are taking, bringing in a lot of players at a certain position, or noticeably not bringing in players at certain positions, probably something that we want to key in on. So we're going to dive into that. And then we're also going to do mock drafts as well. And try and figure out, obviously, it's very interesting, right? Because as we're going through mock drafts, unfortunately, and we kind of know this heading in there, day one might not be as spectacular. Like we're going to, projecting wise, obviously we know, okay, we got one quarterback for sure. We got one running back for sure. We're probably not going to have any other running backs. There were some mock drafts earlier that had projected, somebody like a Jadarian Price at the end of the first. But it seems like everyone has kind of backed away from that and realizing that the rest of the running backs are they're more second round guys, right? Which is fine. That doesn't mean any negative towards them. There are several prospects that I absolutely love and would love to see in certain spots. And some of the mock drafts are leaning that way as well. So cross our fingers on that one. But obviously it's just Jeremiah Love. And that's going to be big because we're talking about Jeremiah Love as a top 10 pick here. And I know that a lot of people feel a certain type of way about running backs being taken early in the drafts. And I get that because I've seen the Twitter discussions of the value of drafting a high-end wide receiver in the top 10 versus a high-end running back in terms of contract value and whatnot. And I totally get that, right? But at the end of the day, these teams, as much as you want to look at and say, don't draft a running back in the top 10, these teams, they see talent, they want talent. He's not falling past a certain point, right? It would be and I feel like we've been very sticky in terms of running backs. Wide receivers can be a little bit flexible, right? Offensive linemen can be flexible. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the running backs that are slated for one of those top 10 positions, it tends to be pretty sticky in terms of even like way back when, Jesus Christ, not way back when, but back when Jahmyr Gibbs was drafted. And there was a lot of debate in terms of people thinking that he was not worthy of a first round pick. But everything that we were hearing in terms of not only just mock drafts, but every single thing that we were hearing from in terms of rumors and scouts and insiders and whatnot was that he was going shortly after Bijan Robinson. So running backs, in my opinion, the rumors regarding them tend to be very, very sticky. So we stick with that, right? But let me go to the comments here before I jump through. And again, I mentioned we're going to go through some mock drafts as well. Before I pivot to the comments there, again, after the running backs, we got the 3 top receivers that are expected to go to the first. And after that, it gets a little ambiguous as to whether we will see guys like Denzel Boston or Omar Cooper Jr. going in the late first. And of course, whether or not we'll see Ty Simpson slipping into the first, or if he'll be more of a second round option. So, and Kenyon Sadiq, most drafts have him mocked as a first round pick. So, but Eli Stowers is a second round. So there's flexibility in terms of the wide range where they could go. So it'll be very interesting. Looking at the comments here, Stephen King, shout out to you, says Duval. Yeah, obviously, you guys know I'm a Packers fan, but above all, I am Clemson. Loyal to the bitter end, to a fault in all aspects. So obviously, I love Duval, because how can I not? Trevor, come on. And then shout out to Rachel in the chat. Says feeling a little bit worried about, Francis Muaga. I pronounced that wrong, but that's okay. We'll just ignore that I pronounced that completely wrong. The reports coming out about him are very interesting. I tend to be, when we hear that someone is dropping and the view on them is kind of fading, sometimes it pulls through, sometimes it doesn't. So, we'll see. We'll probably get a couple more rumors here. I was going to mention one person that dropped last season, but I'm not. So shout out to Sony in the chat with the hashtag Seattle Go Hawks. And then says Mike Washington Jr. I drafted in the 7th spot of a 12th dynasty team. I love that, personally, taking that risk. It's very interesting because I feel like when I've looked at all of these mock drafts, unfortunately, when you look at the round one, obviously you're not getting any of the running back positions, right, outside of Jeremiah Love in terms of where these guys are going to be slated. But a lot of people, myself included, do like Mike Washington Jr. because there are two very clear, these teams are going to draft running backs. And it's Seattle, clearly, and Minnesota, of teams that absolutely need to make an investment into a young running back. And the names that are often, slated for those. And it's weird because I don't know if the buzz on some of the other guys is more so pre-combine and during the season kind of rankings that are sticking versus what we've kind of seen updated in terms of the view of how the prospects are really slated. But in my opinion, Mike Washington Jr. has a really good chance of being a couple of those guys. What I haven't liked when I'm looking at mock drafts is that I've seen a lot of people mocking him in the 2nd or 3rd round, but mocking him to teams as a backup option, which is very frustrating. Like, I think one of them that I saw, I can't remember off the top of my head. One of the mocks that I saw that frustrated the heck out of me was a clear backup situation, not even a 1B situation, which is very irritating. But even as of not knowing where the landing spot is, I don't think the 7th spot for him is that bad, just because in my opinion, I think, very clear top 3. A lot of people seem to still hold on to Jadarian Price, and I totally get that. I feel like that could be interchangeable there. But the combine showing that he had was just so incredible. So we'll see. But I feel very positively about that one. As long as it's not a completely awful landing spot, he's definitely someone that I would want to target too. Oh my gosh, we're going to be getting into rookie drafts soon. It always makes me nervous to do a draft prior to, with best ball, that's perfectly fine, right? But with Dynasty, I'm stuck with this guy for the duration, right? So I always get so panicked about Dynasty teams drafting prior to the draft. But, heck, that's another way to get really good value and maybe get in some sneaky options as well there. So I don't mind that at all. But let's go ahead and dive into some of these top 30 visits here. I want to start off with the 49ers. This one is one of the most pertinent groups that I've seen in terms of guys that they have been bringing in. Denzel Boston, Jordan Hudson, Casey Concepcion, Omar Cooper Jr., very wide receiver focused. One thing I did find interesting is that, and by the way, if there are visits that happened over the past 24, 48 hours, I did make this list in advance because I didn't want to be late today trying to, get it done. So this was made on Monday. So if there were anything that was added into that, I might not have that. But for the most part, pretty good. Also, I find it very peculiar that the NFL doesn't have an official top 30 tracker. You would think you would think that would be the case. Websites do, various websites and stuff. Companies have them, but it's not as up to date as it could be, right? Because you're just relying on sources, right? And tweets coming out and announcements and whatnot. So you would think there would be some kind of nice, neat little location, but there's really not. So it's just kind of finding the most reliable sites that have all of this information. But it doesn't appear that they are bringing in any tight ends, which is interesting because a lot of mock drafts have them potentially taking a tight end to be the tight end of the future, with obviously George Kittle. The Achilles tear at his age is very detrimental. I mean, he's fantastic. So do I have confidence that a guy like him, especially, hey, tight ends can come back from Achilles, especially at a later age. I mean, Zach Ertz came back from his injury at a later age and still was not 100% himself, but still had some very valuable seasons once he did finally get that official spot in Washington, right? So by no means am I saying that George Kittle is, Achilles at his age, he's done forever. Probably going to be still some fine years, but at the end of the day, with that age, you probably don't want to, if you have the ability to dip into this tight end class, which is a little rich at tight end, in my opinion, even beyond the top two, I think there's very good options. So I would not be shocked if they took one, but it seems like maybe one of the top picks for them is not the goal here. The wide receivers are very, very interesting. It makes me slightly worried about Ricky Pearsall. Now, granted, Mike Evans obviously is more of a short-term option. He is extremely aged. We have not seen him play a full season healthy in a long time. The hamstrings seem like they're holding on by a thread there. Which, hey, I liked them signing Mike Evans. I like that as an addition. I love what he brings to the team. But at the end of the day, they probably do have to prepare for the future. And what I will say is that I would not be shocked if we did see them take a wide receiver with their first round pick, because obviously they're not afraid to draft a wide receiver, even when they have two strong starting options. They did that with Ricky Pearsall when they had Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. It proved to be, hey, a fine option for them to take, although obviously Ricky Pearsall has not paid off in the way that we thought. But if it was a first round wide receiver, I would be a wee bit concerned. But several of these guys are second round options here. There's a lot of good day two depth, in my opinion, at receiver. Running back is the one that makes me, in terms of overall depth, is the one that I just don't like. But I think there's plenty of depth in this draft at wide receiver. So I feels like we could be teetering towards potentially a new wide receiver there in San Francisco. So that one is very interesting. Moving on down the list, Chicago seems pretty defensively focused. I did find it interesting that they brought in Seth McGowan for a visit, because obviously they have, two running backs in contract. They were fine last year, no major issue there. And then Seth McGowan, prospect wise, would not really profile as a replacement for DeAndre Swift if they were trying to keep that two-man system in terms of the Thunder and theoretical Lightning there, but we'll see. Maybe they bring in an additional running back if they feel like they want some depth there. We've seen Seth McGowan seems to be making the rounds, so that's kind of one to keep our eye on too. And I think I saw Chicago bringing in another wide receiver. Them adding a wide receiver would make sense. I would assume it would be a wide receiver added for more depth, not really a threat potentially to the volume for Rome Odunze or Luther Burden there, or Colson Loveland. Cincinnati is very interesting. They brought in Jeremiah Love. I truly don't believe that Jeremiah Love would fall to them. It seems pretty sticky right now that Jeremiah Love is just consistently being mocked to either the Tennessee Titans or the New York Giants. There's way too much smoke there for me not to think that, that he would fall much further past that. It seems like, from all indications that I've seen, that Washington would be the stop go, that it wouldn't fall further than that. But I think he's getting taken before that. Obviously, you could see a team trade up. We did see that last year in terms of a team trading up for Travis Hunter. So obviously, you never know. But it seems like top 5 is where that one is heading. But would be a very Cincinnati thing if for some reason Jeremiah Love fell, or if they decided to trade up to draft Jeremiah Love and just say, we're just going to go offense, 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 and just have zero defense. That would be very comical, but maybe they're just doing their due diligence just in case. But something to pay attention to in case, we've got Chase Brown there. You don't want to get too worried, but obviously last season was very interesting. He was very ineffective in the first half of the season. That was obviously less about him and more about the, quarterback issue situation. Once Joe Flacco got there, he finally did pop up and behave in the way that we expected him to from prior seasons. But it always is a possibility that we get another running back in there. And the real thing that has been the safety point for Chase Brown is that he's realistically had no competitors, right? The best he's had to compete with is Samaje Perine. So at this, prior to that first year, who was it the first year that he was with? Zach Moss? Yeah. First, that rookies, was it the rookie or the second season? Second season with Zach Moss, and then he separated. Yeah, that's it. Second season with Zach Moss, and then he separated. But for the most part, Chase Brown has not really had any competition, right? So it would be interesting to see a day two running back get in there and really push him, because if there's somebody that would be more effective on the ground, I could kind of see it getting a little bit messy. So that's something for us to pay attention to there. One of the big ones for me, and this one is popping up in a lot of mock drafts too, so I feel like this one is really sticky and kind of frustrating, is the Bills are obviously bringing in a lot of receivers, right? They've brought in the receivers that they are looking at are not just like day two options, like Casey Concepcion. Oh God, it's going to take me a while with these names. Casey Concepcion is a day two, but could realistically creep into the end of round one. Chris Bell, more of a day two kind of pick there. Denzel Boston, also someone that is a potential late round pick. So there's a lot of mocks that have Buffalo taking a wide receiver with their first round pick, which I know, ironically, is roughly the same pick that they took. What's our boy that is driving us crazy here? Keon Coleman at. So it's interesting. I think that it's a logical thing that they could try to make an addition there, because DJ Moore is not the replacement for Keon Coleman. DJ Moore is an individual separate weapon, and they would need somebody else to replace Keon Coleman and play opposite of DJ Moore with Khalil Shakir in the slot. So them taking a wide receiver does make sense, right? And the thing that I want to call, and which would be the worst thing ever, I truly hope that they don't snipe one of our top receivers. It would be like nightmare. You want to talk about nightmare draft landing spots, any receiver landing with Buffalo, because at the end of the day, we're just going to run into a massive target issue for everyone. I have a video coming out talking about the target issue for Dalton Kincaid. I think we've talked about the target issue for DJ Moore. At the end of the day, we've got this system is very set, and Joe Brady taking over as the head coach. I mean, this has been the same system that they have had for what, 4.5 years, I believe now. So I don't see any major changes, and all of a sudden this offense magically making an additional 100 targets appear for a new receiver. So if they add a new one in there, it just reads as potentially the messiest receiver room, unfortunately, even messier than what we will see with the Jags this season in terms of all of their receivers being roughly even as well. But at least we've got decent volume for Trevor Lawrence, volume and consistency, and no diss on Josh Allen and his abilities. It's just that their volume in terms of pass is just very inconsistent, because they can be incredibly successful on the ground. They've got James Cook that they can lean on. They've got Josh Allen that they can lean on. Aggressive volume through the air, I don't just think will ever be their thing. So I'm already weary enough about the situation, unfortunately, with DJ Moore added in there. But add in another receiver, even a day two receiver, and it's just a complete no-go situation for me. Jumping to the chat here, Just Lift D1W says, can't wait for the draft. And Titans, Giants, no way. This one is going to be, I'm going to make a video next week that talks about the potential dynasty issue, not just dynasty, but just potential value issues that Jeremiah Love to the Titans or the Giants will be. And when we look at it from a fantasy perspective, I think the least impactful option for us would be him going to the Titans. Both offenses, I think, are perfectly fine for in terms of producing run volume. Obviously, we know that the Titans are just a defunct offense in general, but I do have faith that Brian Dable as an offensive coordinator is going to help Cam Ward make that leap. I would love to see them take a wide receiver instead. I think that's what they really need. Personally, if they added a Carnell Tate, that makes them, actually any of the top receivers, but someone with size really would be my preference there. So from a size perspective, I think like adding Carnell Tate would make so much sense to their receiving core right now, because Calvin Ridley is not for the future. And having Wan'Dale Robinson, Chimere Dike, who I love, they're both little. Elikai Maynor, big on the outside, big-ish, not massive, right? But what, 6'2"-ish on the outside. Cool, but he is not a dominating wide receiver one. So you need a big-bodied wide receiver one in there. So I don't understand why they would, maybe pick number 4, they feel is a little rich for Carnell Tate. That's fine, but at the end of the day, they need a true wide receiver one. There is not one on roster. As much as I like multiple of those guys, none of them, like it would be wide receiver by committee kind of situation, similar to what we have in Green Bay, except, at the very least, they do have someone with a decent amount of size in there. But if we did have Jeremiah Love land with the Titans, more than likely, I think that they would end up cutting Tony Pollard. So Pollard would end up probably, landing with another team. He was a cut candidate. The contract is not egregious. They could walk away from it rather than just having, because they do have Tajay Spears under contract, right? So if they just wanted to cut Pollard and not have essentially wasting having both Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, when they can probably get some value out of him, I think that would make sense. If he goes to the Giants, I would feel terrible for Cam Ward, because Cam Ward is locked into a contract there for multiple years now. So there is really nothing that he can do from that perspective. And fantasy dynasty managers with Cam Scadaboo, did I say Cam Ward? Cam Scadaboo would just be in a terrible situation, right? Just Lift, D1W also says some experts are saying the Bengals are going tight end when they need defense. Yeah, I've seen that too. Which is very peculiar to me, because no matter who they have placed, and granted, the Bengals have not placed a top tight end in their system for us to really even be able to judge and say, hey, this is a system that just doesn't provide a lot of volume to tight ends. They've had a bunch of guys, right? Just a bunch of guys, and they spread the targets around. So you could never say, oh, it's going to be Mike Gesicki this week. Oh, it's going to be Noah Fant this week. So maybe if they got like a big body in there that they would consistently use and dedicate as their tight end one, it could work. But as much as, they need a tight end, and I think they could fool around and draft a Kenyon Sadiq there, it would be ridiculous and egregious. They have to go defense, you would think logically, but they don't make the most logical choices sometimes. And then one more comment from you. If the Bills move ahead of the Steelers, that would be good for them. In terms of so the Steelers have had a lot of wide receivers mocked to them. Just saying that, in a third body, in addition to DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman, would be good. I don't want that for our fantasy purposes. I think that, I have zero problem with the combination of DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman. We've talked about it before. They are two obviously very similar guys in terms of they're not built the same. They're two very different, 6'4" to 20 something. They're built two very different ways. Michael Pittman is a slender guy and DK is obviously not. But they play so differently from each other, despite being literally, two massive receivers. Deep balls for DK, underneath intermediate stuff for Pittman, possession. It's such a beautiful mesh for me that I think it will work out. I don't want another receiver added into the mix, but I do think a day 2 receiver, a round 1 receiver seems a little bit unnecessary, but a day 2 receiver added in there, because there's zero depth at receiver in that room. It's non-existent. So probably one more added in there, but nothing serious, please, because I don't want my Michael Pittman to get usurped. I defend my Michael Pittman with my life, unfortunately, at this point. So ride or die for him. I don't want another one in there. But actually, speaking of Pittsburgh, does anyone not find it comical that I'm sure you all find it comical, that for the second year in a row, Aaron Rodgers is clearly dragging this team through the draft in order to ensure that they do not draft a top quarterback. Like, and granted, there's no top quarterback in this draft, so it's kind of stupid regardless. Um, but I just don't understand why they're letting him do this. You make your decision ahead of the draft so that we can properly make our decision, if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, so that we can properly make our decision at quarterback and understand who we are trying to target. Because it is well within the realm of possibility that they can get a Ty Simpson. If they like him, they could make it work. And I want to jump to the top 30 visits because let's see here. Where would Pittsburgh be? I put this in the weirdest order, and I don't understand why I actually physically did it this way. They would be at the bottom of this list. Steelers. They brought in Taylor Green, Cole Payton, and Carson Beck. Obviously, when you're looking at obviously Taylor Green, which I don't. Taylor Green was brought into the Ravens as well. I would love that as a landing spot from him. He would benefit significantly from learning from Lamar Jackson in terms of molding his game and finding consistency, because he's not Lamar, right? But I watched a lot of, I obviously being a Clemson person, watched a lot of Lamar play Clemson, right? And so Lamar's arm was just so much better and consistent in college. And obviously, as he continued through the NFL, he just continued to develop every single year. That development that he's made, perhaps he could help and teach Taylor Green some level of consistency there, because he's fantastic on the ground, but just zero consistency through the air, unfortunately. So going and sitting behind Lamar Jackson would literally be like a perfect situation for him. I don't think he would be a starting caliber quarterback in Pittsburgh. But Cole Payton is obviously someone who a lot of guys loved, a lot of analysts loved in the little scouting process there, is someone who has a lot of potential upside, mobile quarterback. You got the arm and whatnot, and thinking that they can take him like the Josh Allen route and make him develop him into a elite NFL quarterback. So maybe that's one. And then Carson Beck is more of like a backup quarterback, in my opinion. So obviously, they're bringing in guys with the intention of them being backup quarterbacks and the assumption that Aaron Rodgers is going to sign. It's just crazy that if, let's say, Ty Simpson fell to second round for their pick, would you not be able to take that value because you'd be concerned about pissing off Aaron Rodgers? That just seems kind of crazy to me, since he hasn't signed yet. But yes, back here to the comments. Miles Logan, shout out to you in the comments. Says, yay, it's Sarah time. From Donovan, getting back into the swing of things. I missed Malik Willis and drafted Cam Ward in Superflex. Early mistakes every year. It could work out for you, to be honest. When it comes to a lot of these guys, like I think I was just talking about it, like with not Mike McDaniel, Josh McDaniels. There are a lot of offensive coordinators that are not so great head coaches, but genuinely skilled offensive coordinators. And I do think that Brian Daboll is one of those guys. Like, head coach, you make some questionable choices, right? But I have full faith that you can, in fact, develop a quarterback and implement a fine system there. So I got zero problem with Brian Daboll and the combination of Cam Ward. I think it'll be very good for him. Hopefully, the ineptitude of the Titans. And I didn't see any kind of damage. I don't think it was as bad as it could have been. So he showed promise and progress throughout the season. There were no really major issues. They allowed him to push volume. He showed a little mobility, right? Overall, not a major issue, right? So I feel like we could have some promise from Cam Ward this season. So that could end up working out for you, because I love Malik Willis, right? And I think obviously we're looking at Superflex, right? Potential cheat code if he makes it through the entire season with his legs. Like, based off the stats that we have, we're probably looking at a minimum of 40 yards a game for him, right? And always the upside of a touchdown. So potential Superflex cheat code there. But as we saw last year with Justin Fields, even when they say your job is secure and you're their guy, you're the guy of the future, If things go sideways, it's entirely possible that you don't make it the full season there. So as much as they have been very vocal of like, this is our guy, and we know they're in a rebuild, so there will be a little bit of leeway there in terms of, obviously, they'll have a brand new wide receiver 1 and 2 and 3, quite frankly, because none of those guys on roster are really giving it in any way. So there's going to be some leeway there for him, right? He doesn't have to be perfect, but new regime and whatnot, you never know. You never know how short the leash could be. So that might end up working out for you. I don't have a lot of issues with Cam Ward this season. And thank you, Just Lift, as well. Linwell says Aaron Rodgers doesn't like being at home with his family, kind of like Brett Favre. Yeah, that is true. Especially, he doesn't even it's not even want to be at home, man. He just straight up doesn't like them. Whether that's their fault or his, I don't know. But yeah, and his wife. Hopefully he doesn't see this. His wife, I don't know, whoever she is, right? Maybe that's factoring into his choices there. But back to the top 30 visits here. Some other things that I found interesting. I will say this about the Broncos. The Broncos' top 30 visits are genuinely terrifying. We've already talked about how, like, at this point, it's tough to want any piece of this offense outside of Bo Nix, right? Because, I mean, it's like it's a consistency nightmare. We've got a repeat of the situation we had last year with J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey. Now we have the wide receiver core, which was a mess in terms of like on a consistent week-to-week basis, right? Between the targets for Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin, and then all the additional pieces of, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant, and whatnot. Now you add Jalen Waddle into the mix, and it's nasty. And then we're getting a whole bunch of, and I might actually legitimately lose my mind if this happens, but they're bringing in a lot of tight ends. And I do think that they will replace Evan Ingram, but it wasn't really Evan Ingram's fault that the tight end position was so low utilized. It's that position just is not an incredibly, like, I know we like to say Sean Payton in the Joker position, right? But man, we saw it one time with one particular person. And I don't know if we will see that unique situation occur again. And we might be just shooting for the moon. They've brought in Eli Stowers, Justin Jolie. These pronunciations of these rookies are going to drive me crazy. So if I butcher a pronunciation, I apologize. I'm 99% sure it's Justin Jolie is how you pronounce it. My bad, guy. Max Clare and several other tight ends as well. So as we're looking at the guys they're bringing in, I would hate that because, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of depth. Like Stowers is really right there with Sadiq, right? Justin Jolie is very talented. There's some others as well that are excellent pass catchers that could really provide fantasy value for us. And I truly think that position would go to die in Denver. But unfortunately, they are consistently mocked as drafting a tight end. The top 30 visits are making a ton of sense. Now, granted, obviously, they make a lot of sense. It's going to be a day 2 option, right? Then they make a ton of sense in terms of a team to just take best available at that point, but best available realistically might be a tight end. They've also been bringing in a couple of running backs, which is weird because pretty sure they retained Jaleel McLaughlin as well. So it should be the same backfield, but they're bringing in Kalen Black. And I just realized I don't have a water. They're bringing in Kalen Black and Jonah Coleman as well. So perhaps they're looking at potentially adding a third option there. Another one that I do find very interesting, obviously for our fantasy purposes, is the Browns are clearly adding a wide receiver. They have been one of the most consistently mocked teams to get a wide receiver. They've brought in Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, Jeremy Bernard. Jeremy Bernard's name is popping up a lot. It's very interesting. Chris Bell, Omar Cooper Jr., Mekhi Lemon, and Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, right? Because they'll have access to all 3 of those guys at their pick. So when we're looking at the Browns and their unsolved quarterback situation, also they brought in Ty Simpson, and they've made it clear that they might be bringing in or will be bringing in an additional quarterback there to compete as well. Um, we're hearing a lot of stuff out of Cleveland that yeah, Deshaun Watson can, return to being the starter. In my opinion, I think that there's a strong possibility that they are pumping him up for potential trade value, and obviously if they did do that, they would have to eat literally all of the salary, right? But in trying to make him appealing in any way, shape, or form, um, realistically, coming off of the Achilles and multiple, but there was like a re-injury off of that. I don't know, man. I'm just very skeptical of that. But they've still got the quarterback issue that they have to solve there. Will it be him? Will it be Shadur? Will it be another guy they bring in? Probably not going to be Dylan Gabriel at that point. But they're going to have a new wide receiver one. They know that Jerry Jeudy isn't it. Cedric Tillman isn't it, sadly. So at this point, whoever they bring in there is going to be the target hog of that receiving core. Now, it'll be interesting because as I've been talking with you guys and in comments on stuff and in videos, there are some people that are not particularly worried about how that would affect Harold Fannin Jr. And I got to disagree a little bit on that because we do have I still have Harold Fannin Jr. as as a clear top 10 draft pick, like no question there for sure. But if they do take a wide receiver with that first overall pick, knowing that their quarterback situation is shaky, knowing that the offense is going to change, it's no longer Kevin Stefanski who aggressively favors tight ends. It's Todd Monken who obviously was the favoritism towards Mark Andrews existed prior to Todd Monken. So that was really working within the confines of what they had. I don't feel like he's a tight end first kind of dude necessarily. So it's entirely possible that his offense would be focusing on the first look as their new rookie receiver. So just keep that in mind that is something that we need to pay attention to if they do in fact take Carnell Tate or Mekhi Lemon or Jordan Tyson, right? Jump into the comments here. Donovan says Sean Payton still thinks Jaleel McLaughlin is a thing. I think he does too. I think he thinks he's very clever. So any of his guys, he still thinks are things, even though they just have zero relevance for us, unfortunately. Shout out to Derek Lincoln in the chat. What's up? Thank you for joining. Donovan says Loveland, Warren, and Fannin in one draft for tight ends. Won't happen again anytime soon. I don't know. I think this draft could theoretically be it. That's a really, really good. That's a good statement there. Because last year was very, very, we were very, very blessed with the high end options there for sure. And I think a lot of people, I've noticed there's some waning opinions on Kenyon Sadiq in terms of really wondering if he can be a high volume guy. And if I've seen, fantasy people saying that they would prefer to have Stowers and whatnot. We'll see. Draft capital usually is the higher indication of how teams view them. But I do think the two are very much on par. And one of these guys could come through as a third option, right? One of these athletic guys, but we'll see. We'll see. At least with the top two, I feel very confident. But Stowers is not projected to go in the first round. So again, not the same thing as the whole Loveland Warrant thing. Jumping to Miles Logan here. Will I be doing a live stream during the draft? No, probably not. I haven't thought about it. I've not thought about it because my streams are through Player Profiler, and I'm like 99% sure that they will be streaming during the draft. So logistically, probably not. The draft is draft week is going to be crazy. Next couple of weeks are very crazy for me because you guys know I do betting, not on this channel, not on it's separate, whatnot. I just do fantasy football through this show and whatnot. But I do betting, and so we've got NBA playoffs coming up, and I looked on my schedule. I have 10 videos next week. And then the draft week will be very hectic as well. So yeah, I've got a busy schedule coming up here. So I don't think I'll be streaming during the draft. Probably not, but I will have videos that come out like immediately after the first round for sure. So in second round and early. So I'll have several videos after that, but probably not live. Jumping to, as I'm going through them, because I don't want to, let's see. Oh, can I do a mock draft for the live stream? Yeah, let's do a mock draft. I'm going to do just left. Actually, yeah, we're going to write that down because I had plans next week. But, well, specify. Do you want a mock draft, a mock fantasy draft, or a mock NFL draft? Let me know which one, and I can schedule that for one of the upcoming shows. Maybe we do that depending on if it's the fantasy draft or a NFL draft. I'll figure out what the timing on that would be. But jumping up to, now that I mentioned mock drafts, jumping to mock drafts real quick here. One thing that I did want to go through, again, as we're going through some of these landing spots here, and see what, let's see. Oh, no, I've lost my, no. Okay, we're good here. Then call out some of the first round consistently draft locations and landing spots that we have seen. Looking at, obviously, going through 1 through 32 of the first round. Fernando Mendoza is obviously the lock for Vegas. But again, we talked about Jeremiah Love being very flexible in terms of consistently being mocked to the Tennessee Titans, and then potentially, if he doesn't go there, to the New York Giants. I'm of the opinion that I don't think, it feels like it's pretty locked in to be Tennessee, but I am of the opinion that I don't think that if it falls to the New York Giants, I think there's a good chance they might pass. And that has nothing to do with them, in my opinion, believing heavily in Cam Ward, but the fact that I do think that just this new regime grabbing one of the top defensive players just makes so much sense there. So I kind of got the feeling that the Giants are going to bypass offense, even if Jeremiah Love falls right there. And if that were the case, we'd probably end up with Jeremiah Love in Washington. But that one is kind of something to kind of pay attention to. Oh, got a super chat. Thank you. Just left. Thank you. I appreciate that. Consistently. Now, this one is an interesting one that I did want to point out. So we're getting Carnell Tate consistently to the Browns. We kind of know that that is a high possibility location for him, unfortunately for him. One that is very interesting is that I think a lot of what happens in the first round might depend on what happens, particularly with the New Orleans Saints, because they're one of the more ambiguous landing spots in the top 10 for the fact that they could go a wide variety of directions. I've seen wide receivers mocked to them. We don't see it, since we got Travis Etienne there, we don't see the Jeremiah Love mocks anymore. But a lot of different defensive players as well, from edge potentially to defensive back, offensive linemen. So they're really kind of a hodgepodge of not being super predictable of what they're going to do, because we know that they have to add a second receiver, Chris Olave. And this is my one big thing, right? Chris Olave is going to get an additional wide receiver. If it is a wide receiver picked at number 8, that is a little bit concerning, right? Because while I do think he is the wide receiver 1 and that should continue, honestly, you never know. I would prefer a day 2 pick for them just to make it less of an issue, more clear that we're comfortable with drafting Chris Olave as a top 10 option. If we do get one of the big 3 added in that spot, that's a major red flag for us. If not, then things get very interesting, because we've talked about this before, but Miami is often mocked to get a receiver. Mekhi Lemon is the one that is mocked the most. And I will say that there seems to be a little bit of bias that I do think is potentially bleeding into the ranking of, like, so Carnell Tate is consistently the number 1, right? And we've seen Mekhi Lemon and Jordan Tyson flipping back and forth. But I low-key kind of feel like a big factor in the whole flipping back and forth thing has heavily leaned on Daniel Jeremiah, who seems to really have a lot of issues with Jordan Tyson. his injury history, I think, was saying that he doesn't feel like he's playing hard. It feels a bit peculiar for me. But my opinion is that I think personally, I would rather see Jordan Tyson drafted to Miami. But Mekhi Lemon would be a perfectly fine option as well. I just think that for their purposes and having no receiver on roster, starting with Jordan Tyson would be the more complete option. But perhaps they don't want to take that risk of, the injury history seems a little overblown in terms of being truly something that they need to worry about, because obviously we've seen that with some wide receivers that have come into the league and had zero problem, like Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? So are we really just going to overblow something like that? We need to kind of take a step back on that one. Then we've got a giant gap until the Jets, who have been consistently mocked to get a wide receiver. And it's a wide variety, right? Because they're very dependent on which one of these teams draft a wide receiver. We have seen, sorry, I got distracted by a comment talking about Jordan Tyson. I'll share that in a little bit. But we have seen the possibility of the Rams taking a wide receiver. We talked about it on last week's show with the whole issue of them, obviously Puka Nacua, right? But they did say that the extension talks for Puka Nacua are still ongoing. They will extend him. Nobody's letting a wide receiver of Puka's caliber exit in any way, shape, or form, even if, even with the off the field issues, just because of the value that they hold for wide receiver in general in the league. So they're probably going to extend him. But Devontae Adams was the subject of a lot of trade rumors, right? Not just rumors, right? They were shopping him out around actively. Obviously, last year he dealt with the hamstring injuries. That is the first indicator of that you might be hitting a cliff, unfortunately. And you can still go on, right? The hamstrings, you can play through them, right? But at some point, it just becomes like a consistent, like potentially falling off issue. So them taking a wide receiver at 13 is a strong possibility for me. And we know that when it comes to picks, they are not afraid to make big moves, right? So where some might say, do they really need, hey, this is a great place for them to take an offensive lineman. That's a priority that they need to take. If they feel like the wide receiver for them of the future is right there in the draft, they will take him at that pick. So that will have some flux on what the Jets are going to do, but they're consistently mocked to draft a running back or a wide receiver, be that Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon, whichever one falls potentially there, or then you start to dip into the potential take Omar Cooper there and whatnot. But it seems very clear that adding a wide receiver opposite of Garrett Wilson is a big priority for them. After that, we get into one that I'm seeing a lot, and I don't like this one, as Kenyon Sadiq mocked to the Carolina Panthers. And I get why people are doing that, because it makes a lot of logical sense, right? Because they need a tight end. The tight ends they have on roster. I like Jatavian Sanders, but obviously there hasn't, at this point, he hasn't shown a ton of upside there. But the Panthers have not brought in a tight end. Then they haven't brought in a ton of people. And again, bringing in certain positions is not 100% an indication. But I don't like them to draft Kenyon Sadiq. At this point, we've seen various iterations of Dave Canales' offense, and a tight end has never been the number one in that offense, or number two, or even number three, quite frankly. So I don't think that's the direction for them, in my opinion. I do think at some point, I don't think they'll do it with their number 19 pick, because there are way too many other things, particularly defensively, that they could fill with that pick. But they're also a popular pick to add a wide receiver at some point, right? Not to replace any of the high-end options, that being Tedero McMillan, or my favorite, Jalen Coker, but probably going to replace Xavier Legette. So they've been mocked to draft some of those kind of bigger body possession receivers, right? That would replace Xavier Legette, which is good, right? As long as we know that Tedero McMillan is the wide receiver one. As long as we don't get a speedy little slot receiver drafted, then we're safe on Jalen Coker. But Kenyon Sadiq to them, I just don't like that as a landing spot. I hope that doesn't happen. I don't think it's going to happen. It's just people in my opinion, trying to logically figure out who needs a tight end. And technically speaking, they do. After that, it jumps all the way down to Buffalo with the Casey Concepcion being consistently mocked to them. Logically for them, I don't want that. Again, from a fantasy perspective, we don't want them to draft a wide receiver in the first round. But logically for them, if they do that, I think that would make the most sense. I don't think they should go and get a replica of Keon Coleman. Don't try and replace it. Try and upgrade it with something better, with the complete opposite of what Keon Coleman is. Go out and get you someone with speed, right? And so I feel like Casey Concepcion would be a nice little addition to their offense, just bad for us from a fantasy perspective. And then after that, it's pretty much, the only other teams that would potentially draft a additional offensive player. I've seen a couple of people saying, Kansas City drafting a tight end there to replace Travis Kelce in the future. Yeah, but would you really want to spend the first on that? Don't know about that. Obviously, we know that a running back in Seattle makes sense, but taking one at 32 is not necessary. They can do that on day 2 and get a fine option as well. Jumping back here to the chat here. Donovan, I do not have, I haven't looked at NBA this week. I'm sorry. I've been focusing on the Masters. If you have any questions about the Masters, I got you covered, but I have not looked at any NBA bets for this week. It has been exclusively the Masters. Excited. I have to go and check my DFS lines and double check and make sure and make some changes. But I feel very good about it. Yeah. But yeah, if anyone doesn't, why am I like, just FYI, if anyone does not play golf DFS and you've ever wondered, as someone who has played DFS in literally every single sport, and I obviously love football DFS, I can tell you there is no better experience than golf DFS. I like hands down, because, NBA DFS is literally just like a very quick hitter in one evening, right? When it comes to football, you get a full day, great. But when it comes to golf, it is a full 4-day sweat in betting too. So yeah, I love golf. That's one of my favorite to do. So yeah, if you got any Masters questions, I got you covered on that one. From Johansson, do I ever do a show with the Podfather? I have a long time ago, but I can see if he'd come on here. I think he said he would before, and I might have whiffed on that and forgotten to follow up on that one, but that is a good reminder on that one. I will see if I can do that. Donovan, I saw Tyson in CU as a freshman, and he seems like a bust to me. Yeah, I can see why you feel that way for sure. But I'm okay with the progression that he's made throughout his entire career. So I get that, but I feel like he's okay. I'm not too worried about him as a prospect. Just lift. Jets should double up on defense with both picks. I think so too. I agree with that one, but they seem pretty dead set, which is weird for me. In my opinion, they seem pretty dead set on leaning into a wide receiver. Let me look at the Jets top 30 visits here, because it did, from memory, it did just confirm. Yeah, their top 30 visits were very, very clear, right? Mekhi Lemon, but also the fact that they were bringing in a lot of quarterbacks there. So they brought in Nussmeier for a private workout, Ty Simpson for a private workout, and Drew Allar for a private workout. So I feel like if they don't go with the second one, if they don't go with a wide receiver there, I think there's a good chance they might trade up for Ty Simpson. If not the other two, I feel like they might take a look at maybe third round. I don't know. Nussmeier is one of those ones where clearly backup option, developmental option, but he could be a starter in the NFL. In my opinion, when I was ranking the prospects, I think he was the very clear third, in my opinion, right? Once we kind of whittled it down to who was there, it seems like, in my opinion, the one who has the best combination of having a decent build, a big arm, and general mobility, and an excuse for why his previous season, this season, was a little underwhelming compared to what we had seen before. There was a logical excuse in terms of him playing through an injury. So I would not be shocked if he was maybe the Tyler Shuck of the draft, where someone does trade up and take him in the early second. So one to keep our eye on there. But yeah, seems like the Jets want potentially a couple of offensive players there, maybe with that second pick. Some other top 30 visits here that we maybe want to key in on. The Cardinals have been very diverse in who they've brought in, which makes sense because they've got a lot of options, right? The Chargers, nothing really alarming there for them. They did bring in Casey Concepcion. That was interesting. The Chiefs are one that we need to point out. The Chiefs have brought in tight end Justin Jolie, which makes sense. Again, like if they want to take a day 2 tight end as the replacement for Travis Kelce in the future, I do think this is a good draft for that. But the wide receivers they have brought in have been Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Kevin Coleman Jr., and Ted Hurst, which tells me that you better share or sell those Xavier Worthy shares pretty quickly here. I feel like we saw enough last season, and granted, it was a weird season, obviously, because we didn't have Patrick Mahomes at the end. We did not have we did not have Rashee Rice at the beginning of the season or at the end of the season. And then Xavier Worthy injured his shoulder really early and then played through the injury, came back after a while, played through. But at some point, there was enough to see here that this offense is very clearly in the short stint that Rashee Rice was out there, who, by the way, we didn't talk about it. He was cleared of any potential league violations. So as long as the man stays locked in a house by himself for the next several months, he should play the entire NFL season. So hopefully the Chiefs have got him a buddy that is watching him and guarding him like a little babysitter. Because if he is active and healthy to start the season and he is cleared and good to go, which is what we have been told by the league, he is legitimately a potential top 5 wide receiver, and the value that we would be getting on his ADP is very crazy right now, in my opinion. We talked last week on the draft show that I'm a lot higher than consensus on him. I know people feel a little bit apprehensive. We had one comment of saying, no, the offense is going to run through Travis Kelce. In the short stint that we saw of Rashee Rice and Patrick Mahomes together, Rice had a lot of upside. There were targets, I think the majority of the targets were double-digit targets. The minimum targets that he had in a game was 7 one time, multiple touchdowns there. I mean, the role that he plays in that offense really just positions him to be not only a high volume guy, but a very preferred look in the red zone as well there. So all things equal, if he is on the field and good to go in week 1, 100% the upside for him is crazy, insane. Travis Kelce coming back, he's still going to be a volume guy. The touchdowns are not we've got multiple years of examples here. The touchdowns are maxing out at 5, right? The yardage maxing out at 800 because unfortunately I think run after catch is not really his thing anymore, unfortunately, with the age, but he's still going to get plenty of targets, right? So when we're looking at it from that perspective, it makes it kind of a squeeze situation for Xavier Worthy. And then if they do bring in a high-end option at receiver, man, that's an issue. And even if they don't do it at that pick and they wait until day 2 and they go and get a wide receiver with their early second pick, writing on the wall for Xavier Worthy is not good there, unfortunately, sadly. Derek Lincoln, who do you think my Cowboys will take at number 2? You know, I said it before and I will say it again. I will give Jerry Jones credit where credit is due. I feel like he has been making solid decisions, as solid as they could be. I feel like there have been very logical decisions. They've had solid back-to-back drafts, in my opinion, where they're doing the right thing in terms of trenches. I think they go offensive line. My opinion would maybe be, this is interesting. So mocks, the prevailing, now granted, the prevailing mock pick for them is a safety, but it's a very low percentage, meaning that they've got a wide variety of options that are consistently mocked to them, which does make sense. They could go a lot of directions there. I think they go offensive line depending on who's there. Perhaps a Spencer Fano, would make a lot of sense for them. Or they go defense and oh no, I don't know what happened there. I feel like I was getting a little laggy there. Or they go defense. Because again, offensive line building up for Dak is never a bad thing. The most important thing beyond the defense, right, is keeping Dak upright so that the offense can function at top level. But if not, edge, right? It's got to be edge. But I think it depends on who lands there. And maybe, but they don't seem like, now, granted, they've got a lot of stuff to work with, right, in terms of draft capital. So maybe they trade up because I think if they don't, and I don't think edge is going to drop to them, but if it did, edge there would make sense. And if not, maybe they see a trade up opportunity because I think there's a couple of teams there, like maybe in New Orleans or something, that would be willing to deal so that the Cowboys could get a high end option. I think they would need to trade up to really get what they wanted there for sure. But it'll be interesting to see. Some other top 30 stuff to call out before we close things out here. No red flags with the Colts. Not bringing any major players in that would kind of pique our interest in terms of fantasy issues. Washington this is one that's interesting. Washington is bringing in wide receivers. Tate, Lemon, Boston. No tight ends, which is good for Chig, obviously. They did not bring in Jeremiah Love, but I would assume that that's because they know if he fell to them, they wouldn't want him anyway. But I would assume we're getting a nice wide receiver there opposite of Terry. Let's see. Cowboys seems like they've been bringing in a lot of more defensive players. Miami is still bringing in quarterbacks and lots of wide receivers. Eagles, nothing really major. They're bringing in some wide receivers, but no high-end wide receivers. They brought in Omar Cooper, which theoretically could make sense in terms of in terms of an AJ Brown replacement. But in my opinion, if that were to happen, which is interesting because obviously we've got the whole, and I want to talk, but we've got the whole drama that is going on with Mike Vrabel and whatever her name is. I can't remember. But it's very interesting. It kind of makes me like conspiracy theory wonder if a lot of this like stuff that's being kicked up about AJ Brown and the Eagles and Jalen Hurts is kicked up to encourage the trade to happen. I don't know. My conspiracy, my tinfoil hat is coming on there now that stuff has come out. That's funny that I'm blanking on her name. But doesn't seem like we would get a wide receiver unless they do trade during the draft, in my opinion. Any other things that are very interesting here? The Rams are, in fact, bringing in wide receivers. Again, we talked about that earlier in the replacement of Devontae Adams for them, shopping him around and whatnot. And obviously the Puka Nacua drama. Raiders, I do want to point this one out. The players the Raiders are bringing in terms of wide receivers are Ted Hurst, Jeremy Bernard, Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, and Chris Bell. Those are nice day two guys, in my opinion. Nice early day two guys. I could realistically see any of them being taken, especially like Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion, being taken potentially there in that early second round. So any of those guys could potentially be our wide receiver one for the Raiders, which again would be very interesting because that's a wide open position. The guys that are there, unfortunately, have not worked out. And yes, it's Brock Bowers, but they need a secondary option there because it can't just be Brock Bowers and then check downs to almost said Jeremiah Love to Ashton Genty. So very good to see a nice range of wide receivers there potentially going to the Raiders. That could be a nice little landing spot there for, even though we're going to apparently be getting Kirk Cousins in year one, but whatever. Other things that are interesting, the Saints are bringing in a lot of wide receivers, so I do think we're going to get one added there. We talked about the Steelers. Titans are bringing in obviously Jeremiah Love, Eli Stowers, Carnell Tate. Eli Stowers is local to them, so that does make sense. Carnell Tate, Casey Concepcion, and Mekhi Lemon. So those are all great options in my opinion. We're clearly going to be getting an offensive weapon there for the Titans. So it'll be interesting to see what high-end option they go with. And then for the Vikings, they brought in two running backs, Emmett Johnson and Jonah Coleman, which is interesting because the Vikings are a very clear they were a very clear landing spot for a potential starting running back there. Yeah, Derek Lincoln saying you want to trade up and get Sonny Styles. I think it's possible. I mean, you'd have to trade up, right? But right now, it's looking like number 5 is the potential place for him there to the Giants. But yeah, I think you could make it work for sure. That would be a nice little addition there for you. Donovan says, where can I find your Masters coverage? That is with Fantasy Pro. Well, technically Betting Pros. Fantasy Pros, Betting Pros is where that is. But yeah, Masters is going to be, I'm very excited. My hope here is that I'm crossing my fingers here. I think Bryson DeChambeau is probably, and obviously Matt Fitzpatrick is a popular one. Cam Young is a popular one as well. And then Xander and Ludwig. I'm hoping for a Ludwig win. But my dark horse options there are Nikolai Højgaard. And I want to say Jake Knapp, but I don't feel super good about it. But Nikolai Højgaard is my really dark horse option there. And Akshay Bhatia. I just think, is there anybody else? But really, I feel like it's going to be Ludwig that comes through. That's my gut. So yes, any other questions you guys have, feel free to drop on my YouTube channel. I try to respond. Sometimes I'm a little delayed, but I try to respond to as many as possible there. And of course, guys, I am live every single Wednesday and we'll be continuing more talks here. Oh, I didn't see if, I don't know if we want to, mock fantasy. Okay, I went back to look at that comment because I just remembered that question, if we could do a mock draft. In mock fantasy draft was a question. Yeah, I'll try to figure out if we should do one before or after the draft. We might do one after the draft so we can get the updated landing spots, include all of the rookies. Because I always hate mock, I rank rookies obviously right now, but I hate it because I feel like you're putting them in no man's land, right? Of like, oh yeah, Cardell Tate's like wide receiver 39. Like it's just a guess, right? Because we don't know. Well, I mean, we know with Cardell Tate, technically speaking, it seems like it is not going to get past Cleveland, but for a lot of these guys, we really don't know. So I'm happy finally that we have 2 weeks and then I'll be able to put everyone in their proper place. So yes, we'll do a mock fantasy draft. I don't know if maybe we'll do it live. We'll see. We'll see if I can manage a sleeper draft live and manage the show and questions. But other than that, at the very least, we'll review a mock draft. Maybe I'll do a mock draft and we'll review it. But at the very least, we'll do something. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you so much. Again, I'm live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. EST. Obviously, we'll be talking more rookies and heading up to the draft. And then I'll have some, veteran stuff as well. And as always, appreciate a follow on my YouTube channel. It's Tara time. I've got multiple videos coming out every single week for you guys. And then also a follow for Player Profiler, who this show is through. Appreciate that as well. So thank you. Oh, Wesley says you watch pre-draft mocks as well. Maybe I'll see if I can squeeze one in there. And see if we can get that for maybe next week. Because it would have to be next week. We don't want to do it the night before the draft. See if I can squeeze that in next week. But other than that, I appreciate you all joining in. I will talk to you all next week. Have a fantastic weekend. And wish me luck on the Masters stuff because I want to be correct. All right. Bye, guys. Talk to you later.